A crash from earlier sitting on the right, just stay to the left there. The 605 north at the 5, a crash onto the right side from earlier, and then south 605 at the 5. Had a stalled vehicle, that's sitting on the right shoulder.
Calling all night owls, Buffalo Wild Wings is open late. Fill up on some tasty apps with an ice cold tall beer starting at $4. Late night food and drinks start at $4 from 10 till close at B-Dubs. Limited time at participating locations. Offers, days, and times may vary. Drink responsibly. Void where prohibited. Tax and fees extra.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers are back in action tonight in Anaheim against the Angels. The Dodgers have a lot of work to do to get right. They were swept at home by the Giants over the weekend and dropped to third in the NL West. Venus Williams won her first match over a top 50 opponent in 4 years. The 43-year-old Williams defeated Camilla Giorgi in a 3-set tiebreaker in the first round of the Birmingham Classic in England. It's also been 4 years since Williams won back-to-back matches. This is her first competition in 6 months after recovering from a hamstring injury. Draymond Green declined a player option of $27.5 million to re-sign with Golden State for next season. Green, who has played his entire 11-year NBA career with Golden State, is now an unrestricted free agent. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is dedicated to empowering our communities by providing progressive talk radio for our audience. We strive to be an intersectional voice for the voiceless. As a Black-owned and operated station, we are committed to highlighting diverse perspectives and creating safe spaces for meaningful dialogue. We believe that everyone has something unique to bring to these political, economic, social, and cultural conversations, and we don't shy away from the hard conversations about current events. We endeavor to be a beacon of hope and understanding, while boldly challenging listeners to think more deeply about difficult topics that impact us all. With this in mind, our mission statement at KBLA Talk 1580 is simple: to create an inclusive platform that promotes civil discourse through honest dialogue and encourages personal growth among our listeners, so they can become the active agents of change. Our vision is to establish ourselves as the premier radio network with relevant programming across the beloved community, connecting people through shared experiences and collective power for lasting impact beyond these challenging times.
I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be. Everybody's searching for a hero. People need someone to look up to. I never found anyone who fulfilled my needs. A lonely place to be, and so I learned to depend on me. I decided long ago never to walk in anyone's shadows. If I fail, if I succeed, at least I live as I believe. No matter what they take from me, they can't take away my dignity, because the greatest love of all is happening to me.
I'm Tavis Smiley, and she's Whitney Houston, and she sounds as good now as she ever did. June is Black Music Month, and so we continue this hour and every hour of our program throughout the month of June to celebrate the artistic genius of so many African-American artists, including one Whitney Houston, who is all over the soundtrack of all of our lives, and miss her dearly, gone way too soon. But again, all 3 hours of our program today, you'll hear some of the best of Whitney Houston on KBLA Talk 1580. Let me once again thank all of our sponsors yesterday who made our second anniversary celebration such a festive affair. SEIU 2015, SEIU 721, the Black Pack, Supervisor Holly Mitchell, Weingart Foundation, Caltrans, Jazzy J Sweets, K-Girls Catering, and the Pose Photo Booth 360. It was a great day for hundreds of folk who came out yesterday to celebrate our second anniversary with us. We thank you for your support of KBLA Talk 1580, and we will continue, commencing with today, year 3, to do our best to provide a platform that allows your voices to be amplified, and we'll continue doing it in our own unapologetic, progressive way. So thank you. Thank you for your support over these first couple of years. It's hard to believe it's gone so swiftly. 2 years gone already. But we are excited about what is to come. I mentioned in our first hour, in case you weren't tuned in, we'll dig more deeply into this tomorrow. But we just learned literally yesterday on Juneteenth, brought some good news. I mean, Juneteenth back in the day brought good news to folk, as you'll recall. Some good news came our way yesterday. There's an independent survey that for the second consecutive year has found, an independent survey from Eviderus has found that KBLA Talk 1580, even in its infancy, just 2 years in, is for the second consecutive year the most trusted, the most credible, and the most reliable talk station here in Southern California. That's big news and a great deal of important news for our audience. And so you should know that when you're listening to KBLA, you're listening to the most trusted, the most credible, the most reliable talk station for your interest in this city for 2 years running. And we'll, again, unpack more of that detail tomorrow when I get more detailed about the data. But that news came to us yesterday, so we'll, again, delve into that more on tomorrow's program. In this hour, why is it, speaking of Juneteenth and speaking of SEIU 2015 and SEIU 721, why is it that the black working class in America is often overlooked in contemporary discourse? Where are all the books and the articles and the documentaries and televised reports about the almost mythic white working class? Those stories are well known about this white working class, while the labor and the very existence, for that matter, of entire groups of working people, including everyday black workers, always seems to get obscured. So all kinds of, again, articles and books about the other side, but not so much focus on the black working class. Why is that? We'll unpack it right now in this hour with award-winning historian Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly, whose acclaimed book, Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class, is out now and covers 200 years of black working history. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Kelly to this program. Dr. Kelly, how are you today?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you on. Thank you for your time. Glad we have the hour. A lot to talk about when it comes to the black working class. Let me start with this. We got, again, an hour to build this out. So talk to me initially here about the history of the black working class in this country.
Well, you know, it is, as you said, a really surprising phenomenon that black people who were brought here in bondage to labor and helped to upbuild what we know as this country, made it a wealthy country, made it a successful nation. In freedom, were given very little, and yet really contributed so much to their own community, upbuilt neighborhoods, churches, schools, migrated across the country, made an impact in our culture and in our world, and yet not mentioned, not really talked about. And so I wanted to start with thinking about my own family history as a means by which I could approach writing this history.
We'll talk about your family in just a second here, but it's on days like Juneteenth, the day we celebrated, of course, yesterday, where we get reminded of all that African Americans have done to make this country what she is. You get reminded of the labor of black people. You get reminded that black folk, for example, built the Capitol and black folk built the White House. I mean, all these moments allow us to make sure that these narratives get advanced. But why does it take, special occasions for us to focus on the history of the black working class in this country?
I'm not sure because, I'm a historian of the black experience, so right. I focus on black folks every day.
Yeah.
But it's such a rich history, and there's so much there for everyone to learn from, not only the work that black people have done, but the ways in which they've done it. That they have been broad in their vision of what is possible, that when they are organized as workers, they are not only concerned about their own bottom line, but their entire community. And so it's just a beautiful history for us to glean, for us to get a better sense of what's possible when you center working people. For example, I write about the Pullman porters and the creation of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the largest Black union, the first all-Black union in American history. And when you look at their work isn't just about improving conditions for their own workers, but they really become the progenitors of the modern civil rights movement. They lay the groundwork for all of us to improve. So when you think about Black workers, you have to know that their commitment is deeper and broader than we would traditionally understand and assume.
Mm-hmm. Just getting started in this hour, talking about the roots of the Black working class. Our guest is Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly. We'll continue with her and this conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
The IRS is the most powerful collection agency on earth. And if you owe back taxes, the news isn't good. The IRS is raising the interest rate it charges on unpaid taxes, and further rate hikes are expected. Most people don't know it, but the IRS adds interest charges on your tax debt daily. So if you owe the IRS today, you will owe even more tomorrow. And it doesn't stop until you get right with the IRS. The good news is, getting right can start with one phone call to Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 tax relief firm. Optima's tax professionals specialize in the Fresh Start Initiative, a powerful IRS program that can save you thousands if you qualify. In fact, the experts at Optima Tax have resolved over $1 billion in tax debt for their clients. Call now for a free consultation.
Call 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Hey LA, I'm Pastor Xavier Thompson inviting you to join us for a special night of compassion and community rally for Dr. Mark Ridley Thomas at the Southern Missionary Baptist Church, 4678 West Adams Boulevard in the city of Los Angeles, Friday, June the 23rd, 7 p.m. This will be a time for the community to undergird Dr. Mark Ridley Thomas and his family as we approach the upcoming court hearing, which will determine whether or not he gets a new trial. We are urging all constituents, supporters, partners, friends, and well-wishers, those who seek justice for this courageous champion of our community, to join us Friday, June the 23rd, 7 o'clock p.m., the Southern Missionary Baptist Church, 4678 West Adams Boulevard. Let's encourage Dr. Mark Ridley Thomas with our presence, participation, and our prayers. See you there.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Our phone number 1-800-920-1580, 1-800-920-1580. More of the music of Whitney Houston. All 3 hours of our program today as we celebrate Whitney's amazing catalog of all kinds of hits. This is June, Black Music Month, and you know how we do it every day during this month. We have a featured artist whose music we play all 3 hours of our program, and so that artist today is New Jersey's own Whitney Houston. Our guest in this hour is Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly, author of an acclaimed book called Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class. In case you've just tuned in, we mentioned earlier there are all kinds of books and articles and reports and documentaries about the white working class, not so much focus on the black working class. Here we are one day after Juneteenth with this conversation about the roots of the black working class. I'm pleased to have Dr. Kelly on this program in this hour. Dr. Kelly, you mentioned the Pullman Porters and the Pullman Porters, that is, and certainly that's part of our history. But tell me more about the roots specifically of the black working class as you see it, as you study it, and as you write about it.
Well, I begin the book in thinking about enslavement and the ways that slavery provided the space and the time for Black people to begin to think about resistance and to understand the ways that they needed to craft their own survival and to remake community, and that the ethic of care that Black workers have for one another, I believe, begins there. And, you know, oftentimes we don't start there because we say, you know, we're thinking in strictly Marxian terms, right? A working class must be free and a proletariat. But for me, if we're thinking about Black people in particular, we're centering them, the strength that comes from the trial of enslavement really provides the basis of faith, of community, of kinship that undergirds what Black working people really are.
When you use this phrase, an ethic of care, unpack that for me.
I think when I look at the history of Black workers, you see so often people are taking care of one another. They're surviving with very little because they are sharing. They are, my grandfather used to grow food. He lived in Philadelphia. He would take a bus out to South Jersey and bring my father with him to grow sweet potatoes and corn and tomatoes, string beans, and he would give it all out in North Philadelphia to his neighborhood. And my dad would be like, Dad, we could sell this. We could make money. And he said, people need food. They need good food, like home. And so that kind of care, we all have, you know, those kinds of stories in our background where people are taking their time to be in concern for each other. Black workers were a part of networks that really provided opportunities for each other, that upbuilt the chance to get better jobs as they migrated out of the South. So that ethic of care, that the taking care of one another, whether or not they were really your people, is really incredible when I look at that history.
Before I advance to the era of segregation and Jim Crow and Jane Crow, let me stay with enslavement, the issue that you raised earlier, for just a second or longer. I want to ask, as we continue to have all these conversations on Juneteenth, this station had the occasion to partner with a local organization here called the Empowerment Congress here in Los Angeles, and we did a big event a couple weeks ago called State of the Freed on June 10th, to be exact. I think it's called State of the Freed, but we, in partnering with the Empowerment Congress, focused for a day on the issue of reparations in the context, of course, of celebrating Juneteenth. And so there are all kinds of conversations about reparations. The nation, of course, is watching here in California. This station is based in L.A., flagship here, heard across the country, of course, but based in L.A. And so the entire nation is watching what's happening in California on the reparations issue. I don't need to unpack that for you or this audience. But I want to come back to this issue of enslavement, because I am wondering all these years later how it is that we, from your vantage point, from your perspective as a historian, as a scholar, how do we have a legitimate conversation about the Black working class and its import, its value to the well-being of the nation, the future of the country from then till now. How do we have a conversation about the impact of the black working class on America?
I think we have to think about it from a human perspective. My brothers and sisters who are brilliant economists like Sandy Darity are working on the calculus of this. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think about the human calculus. I think about the loss of family when we go back to Africa. I think about the loss and displacement of community as enslaved people are moved from the East Coast and dispersed across this country in bondage, sometimes thousands of miles away. I think about the toll on people's bodies. I think about the intergenerational pain that people experience. And when you think about it person by person, ancestor by ancestor, and we put ourselves in those shoes for a second, we can't even begin to calculate what's lost. So the ask for a reparative justice in this moment would certainly could never really cover what was lost. But we would think about land. We would think about housing. We would think about education. We would think about investment in our businesses. We would think about investment in our creative genius on a large and massive scale, a scale as large as chattel slavery in the Americas.
Mm-hmm. Let me play with that for a second, because now you got my mind working here. This conversation about reparations, here again we are a day after Juneteenth. This conversation about reparations is getting bogged down. That's my phrase. Getting bogged down by the conversation about money. No surprise here. If they don't want you to have rights, they surely don't want to write a big check to you. So I get that. So this conversation about money, I think, is bogging down this conversation about reparative justice. And I understand that there are a variety of ways that we could define reparations, and we'll have that conversation here in California. The nation will watch it, and we'll see what happens. But back to your point, which is powerful, about the human cost. As a historian, you're not thinking about the money that we were not paid for our labor, talking about the black working class. Your focus is on the human cost. I get it. And so I'm just asking you to imagine with me for a moment. How might we reframe? How might we better have a conversation about reparative justice, about reparations, and take the focus, off the money by expanding the conversation, by expanding our viewpoint to talk about just the human cost of this? I mean, I'm raising this because the one thing that I think that many Americans understand when they can't get to understanding anything else is the humanity argument. That's always, for me at least, in my conversations, a way in. Ultimately, what I'm trying to get you to do when you listen to my conversations is to find a way to situate your humanity in that dialogue. That's what I'm trying to get you to do, to situate your humanity in that conversation. And it seems to me that the conversation about reparations has taken off, sort of fast and furious of late, but it's all about the money, but there's really no dialogue about the human cost. And I'm just trying to figure out if you can help me imagine out loud here in real time how we might fuse those two things together. As we talk about reparative justice and the need to pay the black working class for the work it did, for which it was never compensated, but also to weave into that narrative the human cost. I'm just thinking out loud. You talk to me.
I think, I would love to see us begin to repair our present, to give a living wage to workers right now. That's the beginning of the repair, to stop the legacy of inequity and inequality and exploitation that still continues to live on. Stopping that would be huge. Making sure that people have access to homes and land right now would be enormous. But let's not even calculate the value of the lands taken and lost and stolen for generations. Let's start right here. Let's not talk about all the education that wasn't given to our children for generations, where schooling wasn't even provided for Black children through the 6th grade or the 8th grade. Let's talk about making our schools whole right now. that alone would begin the conversation. A massive investment in our present would make a difference and would move the needle. And then we can begin to talk about the past and what has been not given, what never was acknowledged in these previous generations.
Well, to that list you just ran of education and housing, et cetera, my sense is that is ultimately how this reparations definition is going to be, put forth. I think in the days ahead here in California, again, and beyond, as we talk about how to define it, it's not going to just be about a check. And I think that the issues that you raised
we'll take a check, though.
No, we'll take it. I ain't going to turn one down. Trust and believe. I'm not going to turn one down. But I think the definition is going to have to be much more expansive than just a check. But I think you're right. If we could start with those things, and those things were raised, of course, in the task force here in California, talking about reparations, and we'll see what the legislature ultimately does. But I don't see people simply writing checks. I think we got a better option, a better chance, rather, of getting some of those kinds of issues that you just raised addressed as opposed to a check. But again, I don't think it's either or. It could be both and. We will see. I digress on that on that for the moment. Let me move now. We were talking about enslavement, and I wanted to follow you. Let me move now to the impact that segregation and discrimination and Jim Crow and Jane Crow had on the black working class. Talk to me about that part of the story.
So we see in their generation the frustration of people who had upbuilt a community, had built neighborhoods, had found ways to educate themselves and their children, and yet were still confined to the same kinds of jobs. We even see a de-skilling of black workers coming out of enslavement, men who were carpenters and masons and bricklayers who in freedom weren't hired at all, those jobs given preferentially to white men. And so that is powerful moment of remembrance that the things that should have been present based on their real skills were cut off artificially because of segregation and the legal boundaries on black life.
The black working class during the era of, again, segregation, Jim Crow, Jane Crow, expanded, shrunk. Give me some sense. I'm just trying to get I'm trying to get a picture here of what the black working class looked like during that era.
So there's an expansion and a movement, right? So you see people moving out of rural countrysides and into more small towns and cities in the South, and then eventually migrating in substantial numbers northward. For example, when I studied black women, I was shocked to see the numbers of domestic workers, black women household workers, increased dramatically as they embarked on the Great Migration, moving out of agricultural work and into domestic work. Now, when I think of women like my grandmother, they were seeking white collar jobs. My grandmother was a high school graduate in Thomasville, North Carolina, so she wanted to be someone's secretary or a typist or work in an office. But when she migrates to Philadelphia, she serves as a live-in household worker and cannot raise my mother and can't keep her during the week. So there's a frustration and a disappointment, particularly for black women in this time period.
When we come forward after news, traffic, and sports, I want to come right to that issue of the role that black women have played in the black working class. I also want to follow up on that point she makes now about migration and how these migratory patterns impacted the black working class. It's a day after Juneteenth, and we're talking about black folks, specifically the roots of the black working class, with Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to gear with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Pennsylvania, some activists in Pittsburgh are ramping up the calls for an end to violent crime. Tim Stevens with the Black Political Empowerment Project used yesterday's Juneteenth holiday as an opportunity to rally the community behind a message of change and peace. Stevens says the young people and families of Pittsburgh's neighborhoods need to be freed from violence and to end the pattern of killing and loss. Johnsonville LLC is recalling more than 42,000 pounds of pork sausage links that were shipped to 8 different states. The better with cheddar links may be contaminated with thin strands of black plastic fibers. The company says there's a very low risk for adverse health effects if consumed. The packages have a best buy date of July 11th and were produced in late January. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
New troubles now through El Monte, but quickly clearing here on the 10 West at Peck. Wrecks sitting on the right side. We're busy from Pacific West Covina Parkway. Elysian Park on the 110 North, approaching Stadium Way, a collision onto the right shoulder. That has slowed us as far back as Maine. Pasadena, 210 West at Rosemead, a crash from earlier sitting on the right. Just stay to the left there. The 605 North at the 5, a crash onto the right side from earlier. And then South 605 at the 5. Had a stalled vehicle. That's sitting on the right shoulder.
Calling all night owls, Buffalo Wild Wings is open late. Fill up on some tasty apps with an ice cold tall beer starting at $4. Late night food and drinks start at $4 from 10 till close at B-Dubs. Limited time at participating locations. Offers, days, and times may vary. Drink responsibly. Void where prohibited. Tax and fees extra.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers are back in action tonight in Anaheim against the Angels. The Dodgers have a lot of work to do to get right. They were swept at home by the Giants over the weekend and dropped to third in the NL West. Venus Williams won her first match over a top 50 opponent in 4 years. The 43-year-old Williams defeated Camilla Giorgi in a 3-set tiebreaker in the first round of the Birmingham Classic in England. It's also been 4 years since Williams won back-to-back matches. This is her first competition in 6 months after recovering from a hamstring injury. Draymond Green declined a player option of $27.5 million to re-sign with Golden State for next season. Green, who has played his entire 11-year NBA career with Golden State, is now an unrestricted free agent. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcasts of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black. Follow the leader.
Following the leader.
Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
The Los Angeles Urban League helps African American and others in underserved communities achieve true social parity, economic self-reliance, and civil rights. For over 100 years, Los Angeles Urban League has ensured our communities have access to careers with living wages, opportunities to start and grow businesses, and clear pathways to personal and professional growth. Programs like BizCamp, Construction Career Academy, Bob Business Ready, and B-Warp. The Black Wealth Attainment and Retention Program are examples of the ongoing events designed to make our centennial mission to rebuild Black Wall Street right here in LA a reality. To sign up for our newsletter or to support the Los Angeles Urban League with your time, talents, and donations, visit laul.org. That's laul.org. The Los Angeles Urban League is a proud sponsor of Urban Family Focus, Saturdays at 7 a.m. on KBLA Talk 1580.
Are you looking to steer your career in a new direction? Driving for Culver City Bus can be your ticket to a long-lasting career with excellent benefits and paid training. Culver City Bus is looking for customer service and safety-minded bus operators to join the growing team. Culver City Bus offers on-the-job training starting at $19.10 per hour, uniform allowance, and health benefits. Culver City Bus is a great employer. Let Culver City Bus connect you with an essential service job. If you enjoy driving, seek real opportunities for career advancement, and passionate about making a difference in the community, then you are invited to join the Culver City Bus team. Start your journey today by submitting an application at culvercity.org/jobs. For more info, visit culvercitybus.com or call live customer service operators at 310-253-6500.
Heard any other talk radio lately that sounds anything like this?
We didn't think so.
You're listening to Unapologetically Progressive, KBLA Talk 1580.
Something on my mind. the only things I learned is that I need you desperately. So here I am, and can you please tell me, oh, where do broken hearts go? Can they find their way home?
You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Tavis Smiley. Glad to have you tuned in today as we commence year 3 of our journey as the only black-owned and black-operated talk radio station in this country, west of the Mississippi, flagship in L.A., of course, heard across the nation. But we thank you for your support of our first 2 years, and here we go into year 3. Hard to believe it. It's year 3 already, but we are off and running, but only because you have supported us in these last couple of years, and I am deeply and eternally grateful to all of you for supporting this station. In this hour, our guest is Dr. Blair Ellen Kelly. We're talking one day after Juneteenth about black folk, specifically the roots of the black working class, and her book is out now. It's called Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class, and I'm delighted to have Dr. Kelly on this program. We were talking moments ago before News, Traffic, and Sports about the impact of segregation and discrimination on the black working class. And I wanted to advance our conversation, actually, to get back to what we were just starting to tee up about black women and about migration. Let me just start, let me break these two things up. Tell me about the ways in which these migratory patterns, black people leaving the South and going into all kinds of cities up north, into New York, into Detroit, and to Chicago, and to Indianapolis, and Cincinnati, and all around. But these migratory patterns impacted the black working class in what ways, Dr. Kelly?
So oftentimes these migratory routes that black people took fleeing the terrible things that they were experiencing in the South, the discrimination, violence oftentimes was a spur for people to leave the South. They're taking the trains that are there, that are present, and they are following those train routes northward. So oftentimes it's interesting to see that those patterns help people recreate community. Mm-hmm. So, for example, my family who come from the Carolinas end up in the Philadelphia area. I also have family from the Eastern Shore of Virginia and Maryland, and there's a train that goes directly into Philadelphia from there. So you see large communities of people from South Carolina, North Carolina, and the Eastern Shore in Philadelphia, and they really support one another. Sometimes they're relatives, sometimes they're fictive kin. But either way, they are there to provide a cushion for an often hard journey and a jarring journey from a very rural place sometimes into a very urban place that's often inhospitable to that first generation with poor housing, bad conditions. My grandparents lived in a partitioned room in a larger apartment where they couldn't have kids, so my mother would hide under the bed when the landlord came. Mm-hmm. And so those kinds of really difficult things. My grandmother was 19, my grandfather was 24 when they made that journey. So young people making a hard journey and trying to make that transition to urban life.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the role of black women in the black working class. How do you situate that narrative in your work, in your research?
Well, I begin in the South. I begin with laundresses, washerwomen, as they were called, women who took in laundry from white families, took it to their own homes, washed it in their backyards, and delivered it back clean, white, pressed, and fresh at the end of the week. And black women had a monopoly on that kind of work. They had done that work in enslavement, and then they immediately recognized that most white folks weren't going to wash their own clothes. Mm-hmm. It was arduous work well before washer machines. You had to boil water, make soap, keep it at a certain temperature, add different chemicals to make it crisp and clean, create your own starch. Irons were big pieces of iron with they wrap rags around the handle. So it was hot, hard, heavy work, but they did it masterfully. And they noticed that if they got together, if they negotiated with one another about what they thought a good price was and set their own terms, that they could be quite powerful. They could avoid going into white people's houses where oftentimes the males of the household would target Black women for sexual assault. They could stay home. They could care for their own households. They could raise their own children, which is in stark contrast to the experience of enslavement. And so washerwomen become a powerful force, one of the largest sectors of employment for Black women in the country. So much so that, Black women are about 11% of the population in the United States, and yet 65% of the people doing laundry in the country as a whole at the turn of the century. And they were quite wise and powerful. They didn't make a lot of money, but their autonomy, their mobility, and their vision made such a difference.
I don't think Dr. King was referencing enslavement when he made the comment on more than one occasion that there is dignity in all work. That's King.
Yes.
There's dignity in all work. I don't think MLK, again, was referring to enslavement when he made that comment. But talk to me about the Black working class, to your point now, about being laundresses and Pullman porters and domestic maids and postal workers. Is it your assessment that Dr. King was right when you write about the Black working class, that there is in fact dignity in all work?
There was dignity because we made it so. We imbued these positions, these humble positions, with pride and with care, and we passed down, those legacies over time. And so that's something that my parents always said, that you have to honor and respect a person who labors, and it really was a general thing that I think people knew about. There's oftentimes when I meet people who are not Black, they'll say, well, what do you do for a living? Right when they first meet me. But if you're in Black spaces, no one's ever going to ask that question, because what you do is not who you are. And that dignity of self, you can be a leader in your social organization, in your church, and be a janitor. And that wouldn't matter in Black spaces, because there is a different sense of who you are is more important than what you do. But what you do is infused with that larger spirit, that you could still be a leader, a visionary in whatever position you're taking on.
I'm curious, very curious about the frame that you just created. So let me just ask you forthrightly why you think it is that our good white brothers and sisters are so quick then to ask, what do you do, Tavis? What do you do, Blair? What do you do?
I think for them, it really might be that what you do is who you are, and they're assessing that situation. There's a much more judgmental calculus, I believe, within the broader American community about success, about the measures of success. But traditionally, because Black people haven't been allowed access to any of those measures for generations, until this generation really, and still there are hindrances to it. So we haven't taken on the calculus of the world to measure worth. And I think that's one of the things people can learn from us.
To your point, again, here now, I think one of the things that we don't put enough spotlight on, enough focus on, and your book, in fact, does this, is that, back to this point of there being dignity in all work, that our work, I'm not sure I believe this these days. I got to think about this. I'm not sure I believe it in a contemporary sense, but there was a moment in this country where, for Black folk, their work mattered. Their experiences mattered to them, to their community. To your point, whatever they were doing something because they thought it mattered. They thought there was dignity in that work, and they thought that as a community, we'd all be uplifted by them doing whatever it was that they were doing. I'm not so sure we feel the same way these days, that our work actually matters, and there's all kind of evidence to suggest that I'm right about that. People change jobs like they change in socks because they don't feel valued in the spaces in which they are working. So I don't know that Black folk today in the working class feel like their effort actually matters in the way they did back in the day, but that's me. You're the expert. You wrote the book, so you tell me.
Well, I do think, we might want to complicate that a bit because
okay, sure.
If we think back to the COVID moment
Mm-hmm.
and Black people who were over represented in the ranks of what became termed essential workers.
Sure.
They kept the nation alive and going
mm-hmm.
in really important ways. So when we look at our nurses, our bus drivers, our CNAs who cared for our sick elderly, boy, they knew that there was something valuable about their work.
Mm-hmm.
And they risked their lives to do it. And, this nation wasn't thankful enough and didn't notice enough about the real sacrifice that people were making at that time period. And it's not just Black workers. All essential workers were undervalued at that time. But that ethic of care was still alive in those moments that kept, some of us could be at home because others were willing to sacrifice. Several of my church sisters said to me, well, I never was off. There was no time during COVID when I had a day off. And so that continuation of that spirit was that the kernel is alive there. But we live in a different world where the pressures around wealth and consumerism and, these narratives about Black excellence that aren't about what my grandmother would have thought of as Black excellence, but, about conspicuous consumption.
Yeah.
If we could get back to an older version of excellence, I think that might be serve us well.
Oh, now you got me thinking. Now there are a few things I want to unpack when we come forward to give you a chance to unpack. I want to come back to that very point right now about Black excellence. I concede to Dr. Kelly that maybe she's right. In fact, she is right about the essential workers. I'm talking now about Black folk, the Black working class. So the Black essential working class, or the essential Black working class, did take their work seriously during the pandemic, and I concede that they had to know that their experiences, their work, their effort mattered. So I'll concede the essential workers piece of that puzzle. I'm not so sure I'm ready to concede the rest of it. We'll talk about Black excellence and a funny story that I'll share about two experiences I've had literally in the last week encountering Black folk behind counters. We'll talk about that when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like Sprinklers in the Rain and Leaky Faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way Black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though?
Are you a small or micro business owner looking for ways to succeed after the pandemic? LA County has got you covered. Gain access to economic opportunity grants and technical assistance to help your business thrive. Whether you need mentorship or capital investment programs, they're here to help. Find out if you qualify at recovery.lacounty.gov/programs. That's recovery.lacounty.gov/programs. LA County and you, moving forward together.
Your health is important, so keep yourself and your family covered with Medi-Cal. Medi-Cal renewals will be happening soon, so if you have Medi-Cal, make sure you don't miss any important renewal information. If you've moved in the last 3 years, check and update your mailing address, email address, and phone number. Learn more at keepmedicalcoverage.org. That's keepmedicalcoverage.org. Paid for by the California Department of Healthcare Services.
This is KBLA Talk 1580, where hate loses and love wins.
Continuing our conversation now with Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly about her new book, Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class, a propitious conversation to be having a day after Juneteenth. Again, the book is called Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class. We've been having a dynamic conversation in this hour about the impact of the black working class on this country. I want to come in a few moments to talking more expressly about that, how the black working class has moved in ways and I should say moved in ways and advanced this notion of democratizing America. We'll talk about that in a moment, what it means for our labor to democratize the country. We'll talk about the relevance of black working class peoples in contemporary discourse and labor activism. We'll get to that. Before we do all that, though, we were talking a moment ago about whether or not those of us who are part of the black working class accept or believe these days that our work actually matters, that it matters to us, that it matters to the community, that it matters to the country. I was reading a piece, a couple of things, Dr. Kelly, come to mind. I was reading a piece a few weeks ago, some data, and I'm hoping to have a conversation about it on this program in the days to come. I was reading some data recently about black people and how the overwhelming majority of black folk in this country, frankly, hate their jobs. I found the data fascinating that the overwhelming majority of us don't like the jobs to which we go to every single day. That's a conversation unto itself. We're going to spend an hour, I think, in the not too distant future talking about that piece of the puzzle. But in the last week, I've been in two different places. And I ain't going to call the names of where I was, the post office.
I was like, you going to tell us?
The post office and the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles. So I was at DMV last week, and I was at a post office last week, and had the occasion to get to the counter, and the persons behind the counter were African Americans. And in both of those conversations, I'm trying to handle my business at the DMV, trying to handle my business at the post office. In both of those instances, I was told by the person behind the counter, Mr. Smiley, they don't pay me enough to care. They really don't pay me enough to care. I'm not. If I'm lying, I'm flying. I heard that twice from two different Negroes in two different locations in the same week. One at the post office, one at the DMV. I'm trying to get my business handled. They don't care. They don't pay me enough to care, and they flat out just straight up said that to me. So when I said earlier, I will concede that the essential workers in the pandemic knew that their work mattered. Not so much for these two sisters I saw at DMV and the post office. They just don't think their work matters. They don't think that they're paid enough to even care about things like that. Your thoughts, Dr. Kelly? Yeah.
I'm gonna advocate for my sister.
Okay, take it away.
A little maybe they were frustrated that day. They had a little empathy for that cause.
Yeah.
And if they lived in LA,
yeah,
and they work for those organizations, maybe they don't make enough, right? Because you live in one of the most expensive places on earth. And maybe they don't make enough.
Yeah, you're telling me. Yeah.
So I think the wear and tear on our working class in places where it's impossible to live, where your commute would be tremendously long, where the schools would not be what they should be for your children. Yeah, maybe they don't make enough. And, unfortunately, you bore the consequences of that. But we do really have to think on that human side, once again, about the larger circumstances that Black workers are facing. So no, I'm not gonna beat my sisters up. Nope.
I'm not.
Not today.
I'm not. Not today. She said, nope, not today. I'm not gonna beat them up either. But since we're talking to a whole lot of black folk, not exclusively, but a lot of black folk listed right about now, let's just go there because my sense is that wasn't the first time that either one of those sisters had used that phrase that they don't pay me enough to care. I'm going out on a limb here, Dr. Kelly, but I don't think that was the first time they'd uttered those phrases. I want to connect that, though, to this data that I said I was reading earlier about the fact that many of us in the black working class today don't even like the work that we do. We don't even like the spaces in which we have to navigate every day. What say you about that reality?
I think, there's been an erosion over time of the kind of care that corporations and companies have given workers. So when my dad was a young person, you stayed on your job for a long time because there was an infrastructure behind you. You know, it was a good job. You got benefits. You got nice insurance. I remember my mother paying $1 for prescriptions and, you know, $2 for a doctor's visit because she was a union teacher. You know, there was nice benefits that people had at one point. Now you have a very hard time finding a space where you would have a pension, let alone a 401k or insurance. You have places that are, you know, trying to game the system and give you as little as possible for what you're doing. And so I think that the hollowing out of the ethics of our country have left the working class in circumstances that don't feel good, where people are dissatisfied and they want more. You know, more is being put in front of us. There's everything's more expensive. You know, the phones, the TVs, the homes, and yet you can't get there from these jobs. So of course there's dissatisfaction, but that's not really on the workers themselves. I think that's on the American people to think and rethink what people are owed for their labor.
I take that. In the 2 minutes I have left, and let me see if I can close with this as the exit question. I want to weave these two things together. I'll let you weave them together for me in your brilliance. The relevance of the black working class in contemporary discourse and labor activism, and the ways in which over the span of history we have helped to democratize this country as a black working class. Weave that together in 2 minutes, and I'll take your response.
I mean, for me, when I think about those questions, I think about my permanent, never been elected, but still the president of my heart, Stacey Abrams, right? A working class person who grows up with working class parents who imbue in her a sense of community. And she shows the world that working black people in a state that we had counted out could elect a black senator. On an off election, right? You know, an extra election where there's no black president on the ballot, right? Boy, that's powerful. What a reminder. So next time we go to talk about democracy and what's possible, we better look to the working class because they are showing their strength and they're showing their concern. They are the most active, most engaged working class in this country politically.
It's a powerful book, and you can always tell. I've written, 23, 24 books in my career, and whenever you look at the back of a book and you see what we call blurbs, pay attention to those because it gives you some sense of what other folk in the field think about the text written by said author. And in this case, you have people like Robin D.G. Kelly here at UCLA. You have people like Michael Eric Dyson now at Vanderbilt and others who are sounding off on the richness, on the brilliance of the research and the work that Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly brings to this text. Her latest book is called, it's an acclaimed book already, it's called Black Folk, The Roots of the Black Working Class by Dr. Blair L.M. Kelly, who I've been honored to have had on this program talking about the black working class one day after Juneteenth. Dr. Kelly, thanks for your work and your witness. Good to have you on. We'll do it again somewhere down the road, I'm sure.
Thank you so much for your time.
My great honor. Thank you for your time. Hour 3 of Tavis Smiley will introduce you to two of our new hosts coming your way as we commence year 3 today on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Hunter Biden is expected to plead guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors in 2017 and 2018. The clock is ticking for California's Reparations Task Force. They must submit a final report to the legislature next week.